Hello everyone, I'm so glad you've returned and are joining me for today's podcast episode. This will be a story that's not easy to share, but I believe it will offer very profound insights, not only for those who have been through hardship, but also for those currently facing stigma, inner turmoil, and self-doubt. As the heavy, cold steel prison door clanged shut behind me, the dry, echoing sound in the still air was more than just the end of my physical confinement. It felt like a brutal period at the end of a dark chapter in my life, filled with guilt and regret. The freedom I had yearned for during those long years, those sleepless nights spent clinging to the faint hope of one day seeing the vast blue sky again, of breathing fresh air no longer thick with the damp and stale smell of confinement, now felt like an invisible burden, a gift I wasn't sure I deserved. Instead of the relief and joy I had imagined in my brief nighttime dreams, a chilling unfamiliarity, a suffocating sense of being adrift, enveloped me like a dense fog, leaving me lost right on the threshold of freedom. It was as if I stood on a fragile boundary between two completely different worlds. One, the familiar, harsh darkness of prison walls, where everything had rigid rules and loneliness was a loyal companion. The other, the blinding light of a life I wasn't sure I still belonged to. A world whose rhythm had changed too quickly during my years of separation. A world where I felt like an outdated stranger, unable to keep up with the changes. A deep part of me screamed to break free, to rush out like a caged bird finally released after so long, to breathe in the fresh air carrying the scent of grass and earth, to feel the warm sunlight on my skin after so many days living in cold, damp darkness, to immerse myself in the vibrant flow of life, to rediscover the small joys I had once lost, the simple things I had taken for granted. But another part, an invisible weight pressing down on my shoulders, held me back with unseen chains of guilt and regret, whispering bitter words that I couldn't escape what I had done, that I would have to face the scrutinizing, cold eyes of society, the sharp stigma like an invisible blade, and sometimes, absolute rejection, the cold turning away of those I had once loved and cherished, those I had disappointed so deeply, those whose wounds I had inflicted might never heal, those whose eyes would perhaps forever hold sadness and disappointment in me. I turned my head to look back at the gray, solid, imposing gate, a symbol of imprisonment and punishment, where memories of long, sleepless nights, meager meals, and the weary faces of fellow inmates were still etched in my mind. A place where each passing day was a silent battle with loneliness, torment, and belated regret, where I had faced the ghosts of the past and tried to find a glimmer of hope in the darkness. Was I truly ready to face the vast world out there? Did I have the courage to reintegrate into a society where I felt I had been pushed to the fringes, becoming an outcast, a suspicious outsider, bearing an indelible stain, a mark of guilt that would follow me for the rest of my life? That question drilled into my mind like a cold auger, sowing seeds of anxiety and uncertainty, making the joy of freedom feel faint and distant, like an illusion I dared not believe was real, like a dream I feared would shatter the moment I woke up. That day, the day I should have been overwhelmed with the joy of freedom, the day I had counted down every hour, every minute during those endless years, I felt only a vague fear, an extreme anxiety about the obstacles and challenges that awaited me. Freedom, it turned out, wasn't an easy gift to receive when you had been imprisoned for so long in the darkness of guilt, when you knew that your dark past would be like a phantom haunting you for the rest of your life, and society, with its harsh prejudices like solid fortress walls, wouldn't easily grant you a second chance to start over, to prove that you had changed and deserved to be reintegrated. I walked on the path leading out of the prison, my feet heavy as lead, my heart bleeding from unhealed wounds, carrying an invisible scar that perhaps would never fully heal, a permanent mark of those lost years, a constant reminder of unforgivable mistakes, a burden I would have to carry on the arduous journey ahead. In the initial days after the prison door slammed shut, I felt like a fledgling bird that had just spread its wings after a long time in a cage, both strange and unsteady in a space so vast and wide that it made me feel small and lost, like a speck of dust in the immense universe. This world, it turned out, was no longer the world I once belonged to. Everything seemed to have changed so much, so quickly, as if I had slept a long sleep in the dark. And now, upon waking, I only saw blinding lights that my eyes hadn't yet adjusted to, unable to find a familiar path, a solid foothold to cling to. The noisy sounds of the streets, the unfamiliar faces hurrying past, the new technologies I had never known. All made me feel like an alien from another world who had just arrived, a primitive person in a modern society. What pained my heart the most wasn't having to start life over from scratch. Wasn't the piling material difficulties like food, clothing, and shelter, finding a place to live, a job to earn a living, the long nights of hunger and worry, but rather facing the stigma, the scrutinizing cold gazes from society. Every time I stepped into a small grocery store to buy a few necessities, or when I tried to find work to earn a living, submitting applications everywhere and receiving cold shakes of the head, blunt rejections, or suspicious glances, I could clearly feel the eyes of those around me fixed on me. They looked at me as if I were a strange creature, someone they didn't know and seemingly didn't want to know, a potential threat they needed to avoid, a stain that could contaminate their peaceful lives. Those gazes didn't always contain hatred, open animosity, or harsh insults, but sometimes they were even more terrifying. It was the silent suspicion, the discreet defensiveness, an invisible boundary they erected between me and them, an unseen but extremely solid wall, built from prejudices and fears, from the negative stories they had heard about people who had committed crimes. I felt like a stranger in the very community I had once been an inseparable part of, a ghost lingering among those living normal lives, an unwanted reminder of the bad things that could happen, a symbol of failure and guilt. With every step I took, I wondered if they were staring at me, if they were whispering about my criminal past, if they were afraid that I would bring bad things into their peaceful lives, or if they simply didn't recognize me, a person who had once lived among them, had once had dreams and hopes like everyone else, only to have gotten lost in a dark period of life. When I tried to reconnect with old friends, people with whom I had shared so many joys and sorrows, people I had once trusted like blood brothers, they didn't utter harsh words, didn't directly criticize or condemn me, but I could still feel the avoidance, the awkwardness in every gesture, every word they spoke. Their eyes no longer held the familiarity, the warm trust of the old days, but instead, a misty haze of doubt, a large question mark about my transformation, a reserve they couldn't hide. Sometimes I felt like I was no longer myself, but just a faint shadow of a guilty past, a painful reminder of indelible mistakes, a burden that both I and they had to carry during those strained encounters, those conversations where silence seemed heavier than words. I didn't blame them. I understood that they also had the right to feel worried and suspicious when facing someone who had committed a crime, had harmed the safety and trust of society. But there was one thing I couldn't change, a deep scar in my soul, the feeling of being marginalized, silently but painfully rejected, like an invisible wall separating me from the world, making me feel more alone and desperate than ever. Every passing day was a silent battle against prejudice, to prove that I wasn't just a former, but a person trying to rebuild their life, longing to be reintegrated and accepted, striving to find a worthy place in society, no matter how full of difficulties and challenges the road ahead might be. During the endless nights, I sat alone in the small, empty rented room, the four cold walls feeling like they were imprisoning my soul in another invisible jail, a jail of painful memories and unceasing regret, where darkness enveloped not only the space, but also my mind. Outside, the city lights shone brightly. Life continued with the noisy sounds and cheerful laughter echoing from afar, a bitter contrast to the loneliness and stillness in my room. Only the steady, indifferent, and cruel ticking of the clock seemed to count down the time of my solitude and remorse, beating a rhythm for the tormenting thoughts in my mind, the film reel of my guilty past playing over and over, not giving me a moment of peace. The feeling of guilt was like an invisible ghost, lurking in every corner of my mind, clinging to me relentlessly, squeezing my heart in a cruel vice, making me suffocate in my own self-recrimination. I shouldn't have done it. The voice of self-reproach echoed in the silent night, like a never-ending curse, a sentence I had passed on myself, with no defense attorney, no chance of appeal. I could have been different. I could have chosen a different path, a different life, a different destiny, a future not stained by the dark color of guilt, a future where I could hold my head high and look everyone in the eye. The what-if questions repeated endlessly, like sharp knives stabbing into my bleeding heart, deepening the unhealed wounds, the indelible scars, the lingering pain that never ceased. I felt unworthy of any second chance, unworthy of anyone's forgiveness, including my own. Everything I had done, the wrong decisions in the past, had created an invisible sentence, a spiritual shackle I couldn't escape, a dark shadow covering any hope for a bright future, a bottomless abyss of regret and despair. How could I start a new life when my heart was still filled with a heavy burden of self-reproach, of belated regrets, of unceasing obsessions, of sleepless nights filled with nightmares, where the victims I had harmed appeared, resentful and tormenting me? I had tried many times to banish the painful memories, to forget the mistakes that had stained my life with darkness, to find some peace in sleep, to escape the torment of my conscience. But it always seemed to return, haunting me in every restless dream, in every waking moment. Like a wounded bird trying to fly but with broken wings, I knew I couldn't escape the past. I had to face it, had to learn to accept the bad person I had been, had to look directly at the mistakes and the consequences I had caused, and more importantly, had to learn to forgive myself, no matter how difficult it was, no matter how much my conscience gnawed at me, no matter how many sleepless nights became harsh tribunals of my conscience, where I was both the accused, the judge, and the powerless defense attorney, sentencing myself with the harshest words, torturing myself in the prison of regret and despair, where only the ticking of the clock and the throbbing of my heart echoed in the darkness. But then, amidst the long dark nights that seemed endless, amidst the torment and regret that seemed to engulf me forever, a faint light began to flicker, like a small candle trying to burn in the dark night, a fragile hope like a thin thread across the abyss of despair. One day, in the desperate silence of the dilapidated rented room, as I looked into the old, cracked mirror in the corner and saw a gaunt face, sunken eyes filled with weariness and despair, a profound realization suddenly flashed in my mind like lightning tearing through the gloomy night. If I couldn't forgive myself, if I continued to wallow in torment and regret, gnawing at myself with bitter self-reproach, then I would never be able to move forward. I would forever be imprisoned in the jail of the past, a jail I had built myself with my sins and self-blame, with the invisible bars of regret and the towering walls of guilt. In the moment of looking directly into my own desolate eyes in the mirror, I suddenly realized something painful. I had become my own most cruel jailer. I had bound myself with the invisible chains of regret, imprisoned myself in the darkness of the past, not allowing any ray of hope or change to touch my hardened heart. I had let the mistakes of the past define my entire being, denying any possibility of a better future. Forgiveness, I began to understand, didn't mean forgetting everything that had happened, wasn't about denying the painful mistakes that had caused immeasurable consequences, irreparable harm to innocent people. Forgiveness wasn't a dismissal of the past, but a courageous act of facing it, of accepting that it was an inseparable part of who I was, a part of a difficult and challenging journey of growth. Everyone can stumble. Everyone can make wrong decisions in moments of weakness, and what's important isn't how wrong you were, but what you learned from those mistakes, and how hard you tried to become a better person, to atone for the wrongs you had done, to build a different future, not repeating the mistakes of the past. The journey of self-forgiveness began with bravely facing myself honestly and without evasion. I began to sincerely acknowledge the mistakes I had made, the harm I had brought to others, instead of trying to avoid or justify them with flimsy excuses and weak defenses. I understood that I couldn't turn back time, couldn't erase what had happened, the words and actions that had left indelible scars on the hearts of others, but I could completely change how I viewed the past, how I let it affect my present and future. I began to learn to accept who I was, both the good and the bad, as an inseparable part of a difficult journey, a journey of seeking atonement and peace of mind. I knew that this process wouldn't be easy. It required boundless patience, deep understanding, and gentle compassion for myself. Every passing day, I had to learn to live with the scars in my soul, learn to love and accept myself, no matter how dark the past was. I didn't just stop at self-reflection and empty promises. I began to act concretely and resolutely. I found a difficult manual job, not expecting immediate respect or favor, but just to prove to myself and those around me that I was making an effort to change, to rebuild my life from the broken pieces. The sweat dripping on the construction site, the calluses on my hands gradually became evidence of my efforts, helping me feel useful, feel that I still had some value in this life, that I could still contribute something to society. even if it was the smallest contribution. I started writing a diary, pouring out all my torment, my regrets, my reflections, and even my faint hopes onto the pages. This helped me see more clearly the chaotic emotions inside me, to face the ghosts of the past more directly. Sometimes the words were choked with tears, but after each outpouring, I felt a little lighter. I also sought out books on psychology, on forgiveness and compassion. The knowledge in the books helped me better understand the process of healing emotional wounds, the importance of self-acceptance and self-forgiveness. I began to practice small exercises to cultivate compassion for myself, learning to treat myself with gentleness and understanding, instead of harsh criticism and self-reproach. Another important step in this journey was finding a community support group for people who had made mistakes. Here, I met people in similar situations, people who were also struggling with societal stigma and inner torment. Listening to their stories, sharing my own difficulties and hopes, I realized that I wasn't alone on this path. The empathy and sharing from those in the same boat gave me more strength and faith to keep going. During those group conversations, I heard a story about a man who had caused a serious accident, killing an innocent person. After getting out of prison, he lived in extreme torment, condemned and rejected by society. But then, he found a community rehabilitation center, where he began to participate in activities helping victims of traffic accidents. Through concrete actions and sincere remorse, he gradually found forgiveness from the victim's family and from the community. That story touched my heart deeply, showing me that atonement wasn't just in words of regret, but also manifested in concrete actions and positive changes in life. From that story, I understood that I couldn't erase the past, but I could create a different future. I could use my efforts and sincerity to prove that I had changed, that I deserved a second chance. The journey of self-forgiveness wasn't an easily reached destination, but a long process requiring patience, compassion, and unwavering determination. But I believed that, step by step, I would reach the shore of peace in my soul. I don't know what the future holds, what difficulties and challenges still await me on this bumpy road ahead. Perhaps there will still be suspicious glances, whispers, doors slammed in my face. Perhaps there will be moments when I feel discouraged, want to give up, want to return to the familiar darkness of the past. But one thing I am sure of is that this journey will not be easy, but I will not be alone. I have my own patience, the silent support of loved ones, and the painful lessons that have forged a stronger will. I am no longer the naive, impetuous young man of the past, the one who once went astray and made unforgivable mistakes. The years in prison, the sleepless nights, the sweat and tears have taught me the true value of freedom, of sincere remorse, and of compassion not only for others, but also for myself. I have learned to face my mistakes directly, to forgive myself little by little, and to rebuild my life from the ruins, from the seemingly irreparable fragments. I know that the scar of the past will always be there, a constant reminder of what I once did, of the pain I brought to others. But I will not let it define my entire being. I will use my relentless efforts, the sincerity in every action and word, to write new pages for my life. A book where regret will transform into strong motivation. Stigma will be met with perseverance and kindness and forgiveness. Starting with myself will be the lighthouse guiding my future, leading me to the shore of true peace and happiness. This journey may still be long and arduous, but I believe that, with patience and determination, I will find peace in my soul and be able to contribute my small part to society. And here, I would like to end my story. I hope that these sincere sharing has brought you profound reflections on stigma, on compassion, and on the power of forgiveness, starting with each of us. Although the road ahead may still be full of obstacles, I believe that, with courage and perseverance, we can all find the light at the end of the tunnel. I sincerely thank you for listening to my story. Your listening and understanding are a great source of encouragement on this difficult journey of rehabilitation. I wish you all peace and a good